Modern life often places us beside strangers, teaching us to move past them in silence. While that silence may seem efficient, it can leave many feeling lonelier, more wary, and less grounded. As technology reduces small frictions, opportunities to speak and notice one another become fewer. Consequently, people can be surrounded all day, yet still feel detached. Fear often fills the gap, as unknown people are easily imagined as threats, obstacles, or abstractions. Once this habit settles in, withdrawal can feel normal, even though it quietly thins life. A brief exchange can break this spell by reminding both parties that another mind is present. What may seem risky often becomes relieving, as contact interrupts suspicion and restores perspective. The next sections will explore why strangers matter, why we resist them, and how conversation can change this pattern. The Power of Strangers by Keohane clearly frames this tension. If it matters to you, subscribe to the channel for more. Even brief interactions with a barista, seatmate, or passerby can lift mood and strengthen a sense of belonging. These interactions matter because weak ties expand daily social life beyond family, friends, and co-workers. A small conversation can make a commute feel better and a neighborhood feel more vibrant. On lonely days, even light contact can feel unusually nourishing, as it interrupts social drought. People often report not just pleasure after these talks, but a calmer sense that the world is a livable place. The shift comes partly from being noticed, as recognition tells a person they are not socially invisible. It also comes from surprise, since strangers often prove warmer and more interesting than expected. That surprise expands trust by replacing vague suspicion with direct experience of another person. Belonging grows here not through intimacy alone, but through repeated moments of public acknowledgement. What may seem minor from the outside can quietly restore energy, curiosity, and a willingness to engage again. People avoid strangers not because silence is always better, but because they mispredict what contact will feel like. They expect rejection, awkwardness, and poor returns from conversation, especially in public transit and city routines. Another barrier is dehumanization, a subtle habit of treating nearby people like moving scenery. When strangers are reduced to obstacles, their inner lives feel flatter than our own. This mental shortcut lowers curiosity and makes avoidance seem rational rather than impoverishing. Culture reinforces it through decades of stranger danger messaging and inflated images of outsider threat. Fear becomes self-fulfilling, because less contact leaves fewer chances to test the story against reality. People also worry they lack permission, skill, or a graceful exit once a conversation starts. In that climate, silence spreads through mutual misunderstandings about what everyone else wants. The tragedy is that many people stay isolated while the connection they expect to fail would likely help them. The human attraction to strangers is not accidental, as survival favoured cooperation beyond immediate kin. Early humans faced predators, scarce food, and long travel across dangerous open landscapes. These pressures rewarded group living, coordinated hunting, sharing, and social learning at larger scales. Over time, people became unusually adept at living near unfamiliar others without constant violence. That shift made cooperation with non-kin less exceptional and more central to daily survival. A stranger could carry information, access, trade, protection, or a route through unfamiliar territory. The ability to approach carefully without immediate attack created enormous adaptive value. Fear never disappeared, but it was balanced by systems that made contact possible and useful. This helps explain why conversations with strangers can feel both tense and strangely natural. The reward is built into us because human life has long depended on expanding the circle of cooperation. Once people began interacting with outsiders more frequently, hospitality evolved into a practical social technology. Welcoming the unknown person reduced danger by transforming uncertainty into ritual, obligation, and exchange. A guest could bring stories, alliances, information, and new perspectives on the world. Hospitality thus did more than display kindness. It organized contact across differences. Mass religion expanded this logic by teaching large populations to imagine strangers within a broader moral framework. It broadened the sense of us beyond village boundaries and immediate personal acquaintances. While this expansion was imperfect, it still marked a significant leap in social scale. Modern states now manage much of what households once handled, but contact itself has diminished. When newcomers remain abstract, fear grows faster than understanding, and backlash becomes easier. If this pattern feels costly in your own life, subscribe to the channel for more ways to practice contact before fear hardens. Cities intensify the stranger problem because people live in dense proximity while protecting themselves with distance. Civil inattention helps strangers share space, but can also harden into blank mutual disregard. The fast pace and sensory overload make spontaneous contact feel costly, especially in large, affluent places. Still, public spaces can soften that pressure by letting people observe one another without immediate threat. Markets, sidewalks, parks, and other shared settings can humanize people who would otherwise stay abstract. Repeated exposure teaches that difference does not automatically equal danger or contempt. In that way, city life can train empathy as well as withdrawal. The social outcome depends less on density alone than on whether contact remains possible and legible. When public life works well, strangers become fellow citizens before they become personal friends. When public life fails, the same crowd can deepen anonymity, suspicion, and emotional retreat. Starting matters because the initial seconds decide whether a stranger feels approached or cornered. A good opener signals friendliness without pressure and gives the other person room to decline. That is why simple observations often work better than immediate personal questions. A statement offers shared reality first, while a question can feel like a demand. Proximity also helps, as brief co-presence lowers the sense of invasion. Eye contact matters for the same reason, turning a faceless encounter into mutual recognition. Small honesty can help too, especially when it replaces automatic scripts with something more human. The core task is not brilliance, but safety, warmth, and enough curiosity to continue. Structured prompts can help people practice until initiation feels less mysterious and less loaded. Once the opening feels survivable, most people discover they can talk more naturally than expected. Good conversation relies more on making the other person feel fully heard than on being clever. Deep listening shifts focus from our own performance to the other person's experience, motives, and values. Paraphrasing, echoing, and clarifying demonstrate that our attention is active, not just polite. This kind of listening allows speakers to discover what they truly mean. It also reduces defensiveness by stopping advice, interruptions, and self-display from dominating the exchange. Listening becomes a form of hospitality, offering time, space, and a temporary surrender of control. That surrender is risky because it loosens our agenda and invites unpredictability. Yet it is also fruitful, as strangers often reveal the human logic behind choices we misread from the outside. Real connection begins when understanding matters more than steering the conversation back to ourselves. Under such conditions, even a brief exchange can feel unexpectedly rich, relieving, and memorable. The most challenging stranger is often the one we believe endangers our values, status, or way of life. In such encounters, fear typically precedes facts, and symbolic threats can overshadow reality. Productive interaction thus requires structure, as raw arguments usually harden identities rather than opening them. People need a safe space to speak honestly without feeling ambushed, mocked, or recruited. They also require rules that slow down attacks and demand listening before rebuttal begins. One-on-one exchanges can achieve this by moving from slogans to biography and lived experience. As individuals share their journeys to forming beliefs, opponents become less caricatured and more understandable. Agreement may not follow, but contempt can soften once complexity becomes visible. This matters politically because democratic life depends on contact across boundaries, not permanent moral exile. Even enemy strangers become more approachable when curiosity endures long enough to hear a full answer. The case for talking to strangers is not that every encounter becomes profound or safe. It is that a society without ordinary contact grows brittle, fearful, and easier to divide. Small exchanges train perception by forcing people to update what they think others are like. They also create openings for trust, help, friendship, and public belonging that cannot appear otherwise. Public institutions and shared spaces matter because people need places where contact feels normal again. Skills matter too, because warmth, observation, listening, and patience make those places usable. None of this removes conflict, but it reduces the distance that turns disagreement into dehumanization. A healthier social world begins with more chances to notice, speak, and host one another. Survival here means more than safety, because it includes belonging in a world full of change. If you want more practical ways to rebuild that kind of public life, then subscribe to the channel for future breakdowns.